Thank you. Well, we're all aware that Lebanon could have oil and gas resources. What's really interesting is if you look at the history of us developing and exploring for oil and gas, it starts in the 1930s, believe it or not. In the 1930s, the French mandate passed legislation to encourage Lebanese to start exploring for oil in our land, onshore, right? And it's been on and off for several decades. And in 2010, Minister Basile was the champion that kickstarted this industry, so we thank you for that. What happened is, three things happened that gives us hope that there could be significant oil and gas resources in Lebanon. But the reality is that we don't know how much we have. And this is really important for people to understand, because there's a misconception that we are oil rich. The reality is we do not know yet. What do we know? We know three things. In 2010, the US government, or the US Geological Survey, did a study on the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. Basically, it's the sea that goes from Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Egypt, Cyprus. And they came up with a study saying that there's a high probability there could be significant oil and gas resources offshore in that sea. Now, the second thing that happened is that our neighbors, Israel, Cyprus, Egypt, started drilling, and they did find significant oil and gas resources. But there's a hiccup. In some cases, they were not as successful as they thought they would be. Cyprus, for example, went and they drilled 2 dry holes, and nothing was there. But they did find gas resources in other blocks of their sea. So it's really interesting to learn from their experience and what they've done, which is there could be oil and gas resources, but we have to be careful on how excited and how much we think we have. What we have done in Lebanon is we've done seismic surveys. So what this is, if you want to simplify it, is it's as if you're getting an X-ray, right? And what these studies came back and said was that there's a high probability of having significant oil and gas resources. They did confirm it. But the reality is we will not really know how much oil and gas we have until we actually start drilling. And I think this is where everything stops. So what's happened is under Minister Basile, they've started the first licensing process where they started inviting international oil companies to invest and start drilling, but that process has been on hold. Given the political paralysis in the country, everything is on hold. So until we actually start drilling, we will not know how much oil and gas resources we have. So we should not get ahead of ourselves. We should not get too excited, because we could have a lot or not. The signs are promising.
Well, thanks for reviewing the situation there, but could you suggest specific recommendations on, now that the expectations are so high, what should policymakers do to move forward with? First, there is practical aspects of drilling, but more importantly, also from your point of view, is the public awareness issue.
I think the very first thing we need to be doing is managing expectations, right? So promising the Lebanese that oil and gas is going to solve all our problems, that we are oil rich, is not the way to go. So communicating the right messages is key, and I'm going to give you a very particular example to tell you why. In Ghana in 2007, the government came out and said, we have a lot of oil and gas resources. We're all rich. We won't have any problems going forward. People were really excited, went to the streets, and then what happened is like the politicians were under pressure to deliver. So they started spending money to show results. They spent money they didn't have. 4 years later, they started bringing in the revenues from the oil and gas sector, and it was not as much as they thought it was going to be. So Ghana ended up from being like the rising star of Africa to really suffering from a debt crisis because they overspent, and now the IMF is bailing them out. This sounds very silly. It's a very real example that happened, And the lesson for us and the recommendation to our decision makers is manage expectations. We do not know how much oil and gas we have until we start drilling, and we won't make any dime out of our oil and gas resources at least before 7 years if you start drilling today.
Great. So to summarize, you're recommending that we manage expectations through public awareness campaigns, both from private sector and the public sector, the government, more transparency, I presume you're referring to, and also avoid the example of Ghana that you mentioned. So speaking of transparency and public information, we all heard that 2 months ago, there was an announcement by Minister Basile, and after meeting with the head of the parliament in Lebanon, that there will be kickstarting again the project of exploitation of oil and gas in Lebanon. Yet we have not heard detail of the plan. So luckily for us, we have the minister with us, who hopefully today will tell us what this plan is about, why we haven't heard details for 2 months. But so we have the opportunity to have the within this workshop, the minister enlighten us on what the vision is for starting again these exploration into the exploitation and possibly having concessions offshore.
Would you mind, can I say something about that?
Sorry, yes, please go ahead.
I think this is critical. People need to understand, right? Risk of corruption in Lebanon is very high. We all know this, right? It's not a secret. Imagine there's corruption in the oil and gas sector in the future if it ever starts. This is not like corruption in other sectors. This could be grand corruption. We are talking about billions of dollars that are at risk, that is amounts of money that we've never seen in our lives in Lebanon, right? So the risks are really high. And so the importance of transparency is critical and vital for the future of our country. Not the future of our oil sector or our energy sector, but the future of our country. And transparency starts here. And Minister Basile, this goes to you. I think it's very important for everybody. You went on TV a couple months ago with the Amal party and announced that a deal has been reached to resume the oil and gas sector in Lebanon, correct? Yeah. Everybody is asking this question. What was the disagreement about in the first place? What was this agreement? And why hasn't anything happened since? And I think it's really, honestly, I'm not saying this as a criticism, it's really a question that we ask you, we ask other decision makers. These oil and gas resources are the ownership of all the Lebanese citizens, correct? So it is our right to know. And officially, in the name of my organization, LOGI, we ask you officially to please make an official press release and statement to explain to people what is this deal. Because there's a lot of rumors going in the media on what this deal could entail. Probably these rumors are incorrect. And these rumors say, some people say that part of the deal is to give the southern blocks to Russian companies to explore. I have no idea if these are true or not. It doesn't matter. What matters is there's a big question mark on what's going on, what's going to happen.
Thank you, Sassim. Thanks.
This is really important, and all of you should be aware of this. This is not a theory. This is what's happening right now, and what we can do together as Lebanese citizens to make a difference. I'm going to give you a few examples. We don't know. We haven't kickstarted the oil and gas industry yet in Lebanon, so there's not real corruption yet, correct? But there are a few things going on right now that raise eyebrows and makes me very scared. And I'm going to give you a few examples. One of the decrees that needs to be passed by the Council of Ministers to kickstart the industry hasn't been passed yet, but there's one article in that decree that says that if you are an oil company and want to come and invest in Lebanon, you have to partner and subcontract with a local company. So there's a risk here. Okay. Yes, sir, there is. Okay. It hasn't been passed yet.
I will, please finish the question, and we'll let the government a chance to address
so it has not been passed yet, but this article is on the table. And what it scares me, right, is that this would legalize corruption. So imagine this. You're an oil company. You're not going to give a bag of cash to politicians. You would have to partner with a local company, and then the question is, who owns this company? And so what we are asking for is to be transparent, very simple, disclose the ownership of who owns these companies that are going to be involved in the oil sector. That's number one. The second thing is, in order for us to have transparency in the sector, we need to make sure that we can influence these laws before they're passed. So right now, let's say a decree or a law is passed. What happens? You find out about it in the newspaper. If you're not happy with it, you criticize it a little bit, and then nothing happens. It is very hard for us as citizens, as civil society, to influence these laws. So
Okay, George, can you just summarize?
So my recommendation
yes,
is we need to be able to see these draft laws before they're passed and be able to have a seat on the table to influence them.
Great. Actually, this is a unique opportunity because usually the panels I sit on come up with great recommendations to put them in the pipeline. Sometimes they go nowhere, even in the US. In Lebanon, they're probably also guaranteed to go nowhere. However, today is a very unique opportunity. We have the government a few feet from us, right here in front of us, a very active member of government, or leading a member of the government. So we'd like to ask him to respond. I want to put him on the spot and get him a microphone so Mr. Basir can respond some of the issues, to some of the issues raised. And
This is the end?
this is the end, yes. I think we only have 7 minutes. I intend to finish on time. So please go ahead.
Thank you again for giving me the chance to meet with people like you and to learn some more things today. First, I want to say that I heard so many things with whom I agree or I approve or I disapprove. It's not important. What we all agree on is that what is lacking in Lebanon is not to have the resources. We have them. We have the wind, the sun, the water, the oil resources. We have the human resources, people like you. We have the plans for everything. It's not true that we have a mapping for the wind. Onshore Lebanon, not offshore, because offshore is something roughly recent. We have very advanced 3D seismic surveys that would put us in a position, I agree with all what you said, but you are a little bit conservative. We are in a position where we can say, yes, we have our resources, our prospects are well promising. So we don't need 7 years, but all this is that Lebanon did in a small period of time a lot of progress. But this is not the problem. What is lacking? We have everything. What is lacking? What is lacking is the political decision. And here where we need foot soldiers to make the real change in Lebanon. I'm not putting the blame on any one of you, and this is a point of division in Lebanon. But this is the truth. We need to make the real change of a political class that is corrupt and that is not allowing things to happen. We have the last power plant was not built in 1996. It's in 2016. We have 2 power plants that are ready to operate now, but they are on hold for a political decision. We have an FSRU, a regasification plant, that can be operational in 12 months. Again, it's a political decision. We have 2 wind farms, 150 megawatts in the north of Lebanon, on hold for political decision. We have the licensing round. No, it's not true. 46 major oil companies came to Lebanon, they subscribed, they were qualified, and the process was on hold. So what we need is trust in the process. And I believe that this is where is our responsibility to make that change. Everything is in place. The problem is that we have electricity in Lebanon, but at a high cost. We always have electricity. The cost is high. We have water, but again, the cost is high. So imagine that, for example, we were checking. The Hoover Dam was built in 1936. The dam height is 220 meters. The volume is 35 billion cubic meters. 80 years after in Lebanon, we are not able to build a dam that already started with a capacity of only 30 million. 30 million compared to 35 billion cubic meters. Why? Because of a political decision. So,
well, speaking of political decisions, Mr. Sassin mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, that you recently made a step to unlock the deadlock on the oil and gas exploration. Can you tell us specifically what...
I was going to say it. I have one comment because, again, I am honored to meet people like you. I was very happy to listen to you because all what you said was true except the end. It is not true at all that there is an article that obliges the consortium to have a Lebanese company. Not true. There is an obligation to have a percentage of people working, a small percentage of Lebanese working in the oil companies, which is very normal. But again, there is a fear of the grand corruption in a sector where companies would not participate if there is any fear of corruption. This is not a road that you are building, constructing. It is we are talking of a multi-billion project where companies cannot afford to be part of it. And yes, again, this is the same political class that is causing this fear. Now, for example, what did we agree lately on the licensing round? Nothing. It is the simple truth that nobody wants to believe, that there was no deal. There was nothing. There was a process that should start again with the same conditions for which it stopped 3 years ago. It is the conditions of transparency and professionalism to have the companies participating. Because nobody would participate when you open all your blocks and you want to tender for all your blocks and you want to license all your blocks. This is not serious. So we only agreed that we will have a transparent process. And yes, I can say that we are the guarantors that the oil and gas offshore Lebanon will not be until we are present, but under the conditions of transparency. There will be no corruption, or else let the resources stay where they are without any exploration. So answering your question, there was no deal.
Great. We have one recommendation that we would love to hear your opinion on, since we have you with us. And we came up here, recommendations that was first came from Mr. Sassin, but then both the financial expert on the panel and the legal expert thinks is feasible and has been done before, which is for these companies to their prepayment, their sign-up fees, whatever, instead of going to the treasury directly, go to specific projects managed by these companies in Lebanon. Is that something you can see you personally accepting and promoting, or is it illegal as far as Lebanese law, or what do you think of that specific recommendation?
Can you repeat it?
Okay, the recommendation is that let's say Total comes to Lebanon and wants to have a contract. It commits, instead of paying $100 million to the Lebanese government, it commits to pay $90 million of that $100 million to build roads or fix something in Lebanon, public works. And they become a contractor, and they will lead that project. Is that something that you would...
This is very conceptual. Talking of CSR aspect, we have no problem with it. Again, I don't want to go into details. We can spend the whole day talking of how much we are ready, and surprisingly, why nothing is happening. Again, this is an issue where we would, put people away from Lebanon. We are here to attract you, not to raise problems that would let people say, let us stay here in North America facing this kind of problems. We bear the responsibility to make the change happen. And we will do the change. I deeply believe that we will succeed. Now we are in a situation in the country and in the region where we are facing so many other threats. Like I said in the morning, terrorism and migration. But again, if we were in a sound system, nothing can justify why Lebanon does not have electricity now. It's shame on all of us, عيب. On people like us, successful people like us, not to have electricity in Lebanon, not to have dams in Lebanon, not to have the offshore gas projects running on in Lebanon. It is a shame on us. And the Lebanese people are silent about it. So please, let us all be foot soldiers and make that change happen.
Thank you,
Excellency.
Minister. Well, thank you for being with us. And
Mr.